We're now going to work on float settings and the wing balance. And so with that, we've got a decal on the back side of the head that walks us step by step through doing our float settings on this head. And so step one that we need to look at is, it says that we need to have our reel out in the 6th position, and we need to have this tilted forward in D. So we need to now start up our combine, and we need to move our reel in D6 position. So we want to make sure that our head is on setting 6 for our reel fore and aft. So I've got our reel on 6. Down in the center, we've got our head tilt. So I'm going to tilt our head to setting D by our instructions. On the right hand side of the feeder house, you can see that little bubble that's on the head. So we want to lateral tilt until our feeder house is level. So don't look at how level the head is to the ground. Go by our level bubble and try to get our feeder house level. I'm looking straight on, and our bubble's looking pretty level right now. I'm now going to lower my head about 10 inches off the ground, and that's where we're going to start making adjustments. If we looked at our head in the front right now, you can tell that our head is not sitting level against the ground. So we definitely need to start making some adjustments, and as we go through this, we're going to get this head all leveled up with the feeder house plate. We're going to now walk through our float settings and getting our float balance set on this head. And on the back side of the head, it has our instructions for that. So the first thing, as we look through here, it says that we need to make sure that our wings are locked and our float is unlocked. So you're going to want to make sure you come out to your outsides, make sure that these are in the upright position and that our wings are in their locked position on both sides. We're going to then come down to the bottom here, and we need to unlock our float on this head. So we're going to pull this unlock back, and we're going to do the exact same thing on the other side of the head. Make sure the wing is locked and our float is unlocked. So that's going to be our first step into here. The next thing we also want to look at is up top. We're going to be using these top numbers and not these bottom numbers when we're doing these settings. So we can see there's a pointer here and a little white dot. We need to make sure that when we start out that this white dot and this pointer line up. And we're going to make sure this is the same on both sides of the head. So on this one, we're not quite lined up. So we're going to adjust the scale to get it to line up to the pointer first and see if we can make that adjustment. I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So I just loosened that bolt, and as I rotate this forward, I can't get it to move far enough to get that white dot to adjust. So we got to make another adjustment in order to move this needle to get this to line up. So I'm going to tighten my nut back up here. And now we're going to have to make another adjustment in order to get this needle to line up. Since we couldn't get this pointer to line up, we need to make an adjustment to our linkage here. To do that, we got to come down here, and there's a little Allen on the end of this nut that locks it into place. So I'm going to loosen that up, just the Allen, and we just got to get it just a little bit loose. And what we're going to do now is we're going to take the pressure off this bolt in order to move this nut. And before we do that, I've got a little Sharpie here. I'm going to mark the top side of this where this Allen's at. That way I can see where it's at on this nut as we start spinning the nut. So I can't spin the nut right now by hand. So we're going to try to use our MacDon multi-tool, and we're going to take the pressure off of that now. We can put our multi-tool on here, And from there we can pull it over. And now we should be able to come down and our nut should be loose, that we can now hopefully spin it in by hand. If we can't, you're going to use an 1.5-inch wrench in there. And so we're going to spin the nut in, and I can't quite turn it, so I'm going to use my 1.5-inch wrench just to get it turning at first. And we're going to go probably right there's a 1/2 turn, and we're going to see where that comes out first. So if I put my multi-tool on here, you need to make sure you hang on to it because it's going to go over center and be pulling on you. So make sure you hang on to that when you go back over center. We can now come up and we're going to see if we've got enough movement here, and we do. So I can now get my dot to line up. So I'm going to line my dot up, and I'm going to tighten it up with my wrench to get my dot right over that needle. So I've got this side adjusted, and now I can go back down below and I can tighten up that Allen on that nut. So on the inside, I'm going to tighten that Allen back up on the inside, and where I got that mark, that's how I know where my Allen is at in order to tighten it. So now we're on the left hand side of the head. We want to make sure this needle matches up again. I'm going to loosen up this nut on our guide, and I can't move the guide far enough, so I'm going to go back down, loosen that Allen on that nut, and I'm going to mark the top side of it, and then I'm going to, once I have the Allen loosened, I'm going to pull this over center so that we can spin that nut in. On this time it's probably going to be about a full turn or 2 turns in order to get this to line up. So I just got this adjusted and tightened, and now our dot lines up with our pointer. So we've got that now set on both sides by adjusting that nut at the bottom and tightening up the Allen once we're done. Now we're on step 3 of our float settings. So we're going to come up front here. We've got our multi-tool. We want to lift this up as high as we can, and we're going to put our multi-tool on so that we're reaching forward here, and we want to hang on, and we want to cam over this head. And we need to do the other side of the head at the same time so we can get an accurate reading here. So we're going to go ahead and cam over the other side of the head. From this point now, we're going to go down to step 5, because we just did our cam over in step 3. So we want to, on this right hand side, we're going to bounce that corner of the head down 3 inches a couple of times, and we're going to see where this comes out to for a reading. So I'm going to go out to the outside end of the head here, and I'm just going to push down on this about 3 inches and let it bounce up. Bounce down about 3 inches, let it come up, and let's see where our needle comes out to. Right now it's pretty close to being right on to, just a hair on the lower side. We're going to go to the other side of the head and do the same thing. On this side, on the left side of our head, we were reading towards 1 once we bounced the head, so we need to make an adjustment here to get it up to 2. So we're going to come back to our instructions on the back side of our head, and we can see by our instructions that we need to make an adjustment here. So which way are we? Are we below 2 or are we above 2? So right now we are below 2, and it says that we need to make an adjustment to these top bolts up on top of the head, and we need to turn them counterclockwise. Before we make this adjustment, I want to double check that the spring lengths were set the same from the factory. So I'm going to take my tape measure first, and I'm going to kind of hop up on the inside of this head to check out these lengths. We're on the back side of these springs where these bolts are at, and I want to first check and see how even they are. We're just shy of 3 1/4, and we go to the far spring over here. I'm measuring from this top casting to this metal bracket here to check out how even we are. And we're right on 3 1/4 there. So actually this first spring we could almost lengthen this distance out here just a touch to make sure that these are both even before we start making adjustments to our head. So I want to loosen up this bolt on this side so I can slip off this lock collar in order for us to turn this bolt head. And I want to shorten that distance in there. So I'm going to turn it just a little bit, and then let's recheck it again. I went just a smidge too far. Let's come back just a little bit. There. Now I know I'm at an even starting point between both those springs. I'm going to now mark these so that I know what position they're both in. So I'm going to mark these straight pointing back so I kind of know right where the starting point of both of these are at. And I need to loosen up my nut on this side now. So when we read those instructions on the back of the head, it said that if we were below 2, we needed to turn these counterclockwise. So I want to move them both the same distance. Then we're going to recheck again how we're coming out on our setting. So I'm going to make one full turn and we're going to see what happens. So we just made one full turn. We're now going to bounce the head again. So we just bounced the head and we're still we're more like 1.5, so we're still not quite to 2. So we would need to loosen up a little bit more again. Bounce it again. So we're pretty close to right on 2 there. We're going to run back to that side and rebounce that side again and double check, see where we're at now. So we're going to bounce the right hand side of the head. And we're a little light below 2 on this side now, so we want to make a little bit of adjustment to this side as well. So I'm going to mark the center of these bolts. And we haven't checked the spacing on these springs on this side, so we're going to do that first before making any adjustments. We're at 3 1/4 and we're just a little over 3 1/4, so we want to adjust this one just a little bit first. I'm going to crack loose our hold downs. And from there first, we're going to go, let's go one full turn. Let's check our measurement now. And we are pretty close to 3 1/4 there now. So we know we have both springs set even. Let's rebounce our head again. We could make probably a half adjustment here to check this out. So again, we want to get it closer to 2, and to get it closer to 2 by our instructions, we're going to go counterclockwise. So I'm going to go counterclockwise a half of a turn. That's why I have these marks on my bolts so I can see the half a turn. So I just did a half a turn. We bounce the head And now we're right on 2 on this side. So we're sitting pretty good. Let's go ahead and bounce the head on the other side. And we could probably do just a little bit more on that side, maybe another half or a quarter of a turn on the left side. I'll make that adjustment quick. So we're right on 2 now on that side. We'll double check our right side. We need to move just a little bit more. We're going to just turn it 1 flat side of a turn on this side. Let's try that. So we're right on 2, dead on this side. Bounce your side over there again. And we're right on 2 on that side. So that gets our float set on both sides of the head. We can go ahead now, move our locks back up and tighten them down. So we've got our locks tightened now on both sides. That completes getting our float set. We want to return this cam back, but instead of using our bar to push that over and taking the chance of letting it go, we're going to hit this with our palm and make sure that our hands are free and clear. And we just hit it quick, and we do the same to the other side. And that released our head back into its position. Our next step when we start adjusting our wing flex, before we make any adjustments to the wing flex, we got a couple of things we want to check. First thing we want to do is make sure that our wing, that we're still in the lock position. Once we're in the lock position, we're going to put our 1/2 inch breaker bar in the slot up here. We want to look at our bell crank, and we want to make sure that this slot is level with the top of the head frame. So I can look in there, and as you move it up and down, we're going to pull it till we're level. I would say up just a touch. Right there we're level. So I look through here and I make sure that this is level with the top of the header frame on the other side. Once that's level and in position, we need to go down below, and we are going to see a white line on the inside, and we want to make sure that where that white line is at, that it is at the top of the hook that is to the left of the white line. So as we look across at that white line, our hook is actually still right above the white line when we're looking straight on. In the camera view, it's hard to quite tell, but because that hook is above the white line, we need to bring that white line up a little bit. So now we need to come up top again, and we're going to come to this linkage right here, and now we're going to have to bend back these tabs, and we need to shorten this linkage just a little bit in order to bring that white line up. So now that we have those tabs bent down, we need to loosen up this lock nut. So we've got our nut loose, and now we need to shorten this linkage in here. So we can either just turn this by a wrench to shorten it, And we're going to want to shorten it, so we're going to go clockwise with it. Or sorry, counterclockwise with it. We're going to just make a small adjustment. And now we want to go back down and look again. So we're going to make sure that we're get leveled with our bar. So we're going to come down just a little bit right there. I'm going to come back down and look at our white line. And looking at our white line, it looks like we are right at the top of the hook on this side. So we've got this side adjusted good. We can tighten our nut back down on this side. Tighten our nut back down. See if we can get to adjust it and loosen up to get those little tabs so they'll bend back up again. Now we got to bend our tabs back up. We've got our tabs bent, and now we can go to the other side. So now we're on our right hand side. We're going to make sure that our bell housing is parallel with the header frame. We've got it set with the header frame. I want to come down below and check with our white line on this side. So we can see our white line and the top of our hook, and our hook is still above our white line. So we need to bring that white line up a little bit higher. So now we got to bend back those tabs again and make our adjustment just like what we did on the other side. So we're just double checking again. We made some adjustments and we're making sure that our bell housing is still level with the top of this frame, parallel I mean. We're going to come back down and we're going to check that our white line is even with the top of that hook. So now that we've got that white line even with the top of the hook, we now have those set and we can start doing our wing flex adjustments. So now that we've got this adjusted, we can now continue on doing our wing flex adjustments, and we can follow the diagram on the back side of the head. So we're going to start out now. We're going to be on step 2. We see on step 1 we still have our reel set in D6, and we're going to be working on the right side of the head first. So we need to make sure that we have our floats locked on both sides of the head, our wing locked on the left side and unlocked on the right side. So I'm going to go to the bottom and I'm going to lock our float on the right side, and I'm going to lock our float on the left side. So we just locked it on the left side. Our left wing is in the lock position, and our right wing we need to bring down in the unlock position. We're going to use this gauge up here in the center, and we see we've got a cable hanging here. This cable we got to bring up and hook around. So we get our cable hooked around up here in the center. We want to squeeze together our two gauges because these are going to move back and forth. We want to make sure that they move freely, and we're going to squeeze them together centered. Now we're going to take our MacDon multi-purpose tool here. We're going to put that on here, and our instruction says that we need to slowly move it both directions 2 times. So I'm going to slowly pull down on this, and we can see until we hit our stops. So we hit our stops, and now we're going to go back the other way slowly until we hit our stops. We're going to move back again slowly the opposite direction until we hit our stops, and back the other way one more time till we hit our stops. Now we come back to center. So our gauge reads that we are on the top side slightly below 2, and on the bottom side we are right on 2. So if we come back to our gauge over here on the side, we can look and see where we want to be. So we want to be right at 2 on our gauge, or even. So if we look at the top gauge, it says if our bottom is closer and our top is further away, this is what we do. And on our second one, if our top is closer and our bottom is further away, which is what we got going on, our top is closer and our bottom is just a smidge over 2, this is the adjustment that we need to make in this example. So we need to move this camber out just a little bit. So when we come up here in the center, that's this piece here has to move out. So in order to do that, we have to make an adjustment here. So this is our adjustment. We got to move our lock in, and it said in order to do the adjustment for that one, we needed to move this out. So in order to move that out, we are going to spin this up. I'm going to have to use the ratcheting end in order to. So we can see that this is, my piece is locked in here. So this is sliding out. As I'm tightening that, we're not going to make much of a turn, and we're going to spin these together again. So they're starting back out at 0. And now we're going to do 2 times, slowly one way till it stops. We're going to go back the other way till it stops. Go back the other way, and one more time, and then we're going to check and see how it looks. So now when we look at it, we are just barely on the top side of 2, and we are just barely below 2 on that example. So we're going to come back over to our measurement here, and our top side is still a touch closer, so we want to slide this out again just a touch more. It doesn't take much adjustment. Let me move that so it locks into place here. I'm going to spin these back together, and now let's try doing our check again 2 times. Back one more time the other way. So we just completed our test, and if we look at that, our top is dead on 2. Our bottom is maybe just right above 2 at this point. So we're almost just a touch opposite, if anything, of where we were before. I mean, we're sitting pretty darn close to them. It'd be hard to tell the difference there now. If anything, if we wanted to, we could back it back just a touch to get them set. So I'm going to go backwards from where I was. I'm going to move this camber back the other way. We're just going to try just that much. Spin these back together, and let's check it again. Just completed our second time. We're going to come up here and look, and you can see they're both just on the bottom side of 2, so they're both even at this point, and we're good. So the next thing we want to do is I'm just going to spin those back together and I want to lock the head up again. So we're going to lock our head, and then we're going to got our head locked into place so we can adjust the other side before we took our tool off. We need to make sure we take our cable off once we are done. We're now going to go to the other side of the head and make the same adjustments. So we're now on the left hand side of the head. We're on our second time of rotating it to see where we're at. And when we look at this side, we can see that we're just barely above 2 and we're barely below 2. So if we go to our reference diagram at this point, we can see that since the top side is further away, we need to now run this piece in towards the center and not out towards the outside. So we're going to make that adjustment now. So now we've just made our adjustments. We had to actually move this in a little bit, and now once we finished up, we ended up right on 2 on both sides. So we've got our ring flex set, and so now at this point we can lock our wing back in place, and then we can raise our wing back up so it goes in the lock position. So make sure our cable is back off after we get done making these adjustments on this side.